SVC Media.
Welcome to the iGaming Daily Podcast, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market.
With the Euros moving into its final stages and England fans fixated on the national team's somehow continued survival throughout the tournament, clubs in the country's domestic scene are preparing for the onset of the 2024-25 season, which kicks off in just a month's time. This has included a sudden upsurge in betting sponsorship deals signed by some prominent clubs in the top flight. On this episode of iGaming Daily, sponsored by Optimove, the Insider Sport team are going to discuss the context behind these partnerships and why both clubs and bookmakers are eager to put pen to paper on some deals. First off, though, we'll have a word from our sponsor, Optimove. Optimove is the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. 56% of the EGR Power 50 personalised player experience of Optimove. To get a free demo, go to www.optimove.com/SBC. I will also leave some links in the description for this episode. So, back onto the context of the discussion. I'm Ted Orme-Claye. I'm here in the studio with Callum Williams and Kieran O'Connor from the Insider Sport team. Before we get into things, lads, how have you been enjoying the football lately?
Not very much. It's been awful as an England fan. Somehow we're in the tournament still, but football quality overall across the tournament's been okay. Not been the greatest, but see if it picks up into life sooner rather than later. What about you, Kieran?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying the fact that I was enjoying it at the start of the tournament when you've got games on from 2, 5 and 8 or for all the day really. There's always football on anytime you turn the TV on. I've enjoyed that bit. Not the biggest international football fan in general, but there's been some great goals, even though there's been a lot of own goals. So yeah, I've just been really enjoying the content so far.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Callum, the overall quality's been pretty good, but I think England are definitely the exception to that, aren't they? Certainly as a fan of them. I've become a bit of a Georgia fan throughout this tournament. I've kind of been rooting for the underdog a bit there, and they've got some decent players from like the Italian leagues and stuff, haven't they? Quite entertaining to watch. But yeah, let's ground the conversation, head back to England for the domestic side of things, have a chat about some of the deals we've seen lately. So, who's been partnering with who and sort of how these partnerships differed from one another? Kieran, I know you've covered a few of these, so I'll start with you first.
Yeah, so let's start with Net88. So, Crystal Palace named the Philippine-based online casino Net88 the men's official front of shirt sponsor for the 2024-25 season, and they're also going to sponsor the training kit. That deal was described as a record deal. Not completely sure on how much that come to, but it was described as a record deal by the club. Obviously, Crystal Palace have got previous with sort of Asian companies. Back in 2022, they were with W88. Then they've sort of moved away and partnered with a car retailer, and then returned to betting in 2023 with Kieran Sports, I believe it's called. You've then got another deal with DefBet. That was with Wolverhampton Wanderers. They agreed a 2-year sponsorship again to become the team's front of shirt sponsor, which was also described as the biggest in the club's history. The deal was. And they'll also be sponsoring the men's and the women's first team kit and training kit as well. Sort of moving on to BetMGM, who had a flurry of sponsorships over the past week. Sort of partnering with Wolverhampton Wanderers again, Newcastle and Tottenham Hotspur. Wolves and Newcastle's deals both included pretty much just exposure at the grounds, on the LED advertising systems, and on their social media brands. All three of these deals are 2-year deals. And then Tottenham Hotspur's differed a little bit as they have become the official training wear partner of Spurs. Also, that is a 3-year agreement, that one. So yeah, there's been a lot of deals. And then just recently, I'll just mention this one. There's one with 96.com, who partner with Burnley. Obviously, Burnley aren't in the Premier League this season. That's another one that sort of caught the eye of a lot of people at home and a lot of football fans. There's not really anybody knows much about the operator. And they will be the team's official front of shirt sponsor for the next 2 years as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of the makeup of these deals, because you've got things like you said with BetMGM partnering with Spurs with the kit deal is quite an interesting one. Obviously, I think they're just sort of looking for what avenues are available, because these teams will already have existing like front of shirt partners, sleeve partners, anything like that. So it's just seeing where it is. But the training kit one's interesting, because I think from the outset you might think that that's not going to get them as much visibility of front of shirt. But I think like when you think about social media and stuff like that, there's going to be videos of Tottenham players in training and things like that are quite regular.
Pretty much warm up as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, stuff like that. So it's still going to get the brand some exposure there. And obviously BetMGM only launched in this country a few months back, so I think they're really sort of going hard to get some visibility in the top flight, which is the most widely viewed football league, not only in England but outside this country's borders. So obviously, Kieran, I noticed something you mentioned a lot was the fact that these are 2-year deals. I think that's quite a significant time frame, isn't it? Callum, could you sort of give the listeners, I know this is something we talked about a lot, but what's the significance of this, the context of it, with the betting side of things? Why are bookmakers so keen to get deals signed this season within this 2-year time frame? Yeah,
so in 2 years' time, at the end of the 25-26 season, the front of shirt gambling sponsorship ban's going to take into effect. Now, this means that any and all gambling companies, betting companies, you name it, gaming companies, they can't be sponsored in front of Premier League home shirts in the front of the kit, although they are allowed to have sleeve sponsorships, which is something that we've seen quite a lot over the last several years or so. So clubs and operators, they're both just making up time, really, trying to cash in this 2-year period. Because the ban comes in 2 years after the 25-26 season. It's just looking to get more visibility, and I'm kind of not surprised that there's a lot of lesser well-known operators like Net88 or Debet with Wolves. It's kind of no surprise that they're coming in just about 2 years before this ban comes into effect, because they like you said, the Premier League's the biggest platform in world football, so they're looking to then get as much visibility and much brand exposure as they can before this ban comes into effect. I think the clubs are also looking to, because gambling sponsorship really, and typically they've all had the most money to offer for clubs. I mean, like Kieran said, the Net88 deal with Palace is a record deal. The Debet one with Wolves is a record deal. So for clubs as well, they've also got to manage their finances a lot more stringently with the profit and sustainability rules coming in. So they're now really trying to look for the most maximum and most optimal sponsorship agreements that they can find, and it's clearly coming from the gambling companies at the moment. So they're in a rush to try and maximise profits, maximise revenue before this gambling ban comes into effect. So it's almost you scratch our back, we'll scratch your type deal between the clubs and the gambling operators.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make at the end of that with PSR. Obviously, we've seen quite a few developments over the past year that have given clubs quite a big motivation to make sure they're on top of their finances and on top of revenue. I mean, Kieran, I know you've covered some of this for Insider Sport. Could you sort of give us a bit of a breakdown of that? Why are clubs more than ever quite keen to keep an eye on these sort of things?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of talk in recent months and sort of the past season over new PSR changes and rules, and I know that the club that I support, Manchester United, our new minority owner, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, has been pretty opinionated on some of the new rules they're going to bring in, talking about anchoring, for example, and stuff like that. And he's said in many interviews that at the end of the day, if you're going to be successful, you need to get the revenue in, and this is what these teams are doing, it seems. They're not too worried about who they're getting it from. They just need the revenue in to sort of balance the books. Talking on that sort of anchoring and the new rules, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure at the minute, is it 105 million they can spend over seasons?
Across 3 years, yeah. That's the threshold.
So this new anchoring is sort of looking to, I suppose, regulate the league a little bit. I think from the league's point of view, I think they're trying to make it a bit fairer. It's got teams like Manchester United who generate revenue without these sort of deals through kit sales, ticket sales. They're just big brands across the globe. were teams like Palace, who have got these really, really rich owners. And he's come out in an interview and sort of said this himself, one of the Palace owners, and said, look, we have probably some of the richest people on our board, but we're not able to use the money because of the restrictions you're putting on us. So yeah, I think it'll be quite interesting, and you'll probably see a lot more of these deals in the coming weeks, to be honest with you, especially with teams like Palace. And I'd also be looking at some of the teams that have come up. I mean, I don't think Leicester have announced a front of kit sponsorship yet, have they?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I don't know if they have yet.
And
so that could be
Ipswich as well.
One. Yeah.
So Ipswich and Leicester I'd keep an eye on. I definitely think them two could be two teams joining the likes of Wolves and Palace in sort of acquiring these sort of sponsorship deals.
Yeah, Ipswich are an interesting one to mention, I think, because obviously this is them returning to the top flight after quite a long absence. And, we saw that happen with like Luton last year, obviously come up and then struggled quite a lot and ended up getting relegated. So, yeah, teams like Ipswich might well be thinking, how can we really maximise the revenue and get in on all of these sort of the lucrative opportunities you get from being in the Premier League, and with it being the most viewed league sort of in England and internationally. And the various companies are going to look to capitalise on that by partnering with clubs. That will obviously then provide a good boost to their revenues and hopefully for them play a role in keeping them up. So I think that's quite a significant one to mention. I think it's also interesting to note that I think so far with the two clubs last year that got impacted the most arguably by the PSR rules are obviously Everton and Nottingham Forest, weren't they, who got the points deductions. Neither of them have announced any deals yet, but obviously Forest is partnered with Kieran Sports, who you mentioned earlier, have had previous dealings in the league. And Everton, are Everton still partnered with Stake?
I think they're they're entering the final year of the deal with Stake.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
You don't quote me on that, but I feel like that's what it is.
I feel like it's a bit more long running, isn't it? So they've both got these existing revenue streams coming in anyway. But they're the two examples I think a lot of clubs are going to be looking to, aren't they? Thinking we don't want to end up like Forest and Everton, who've sort of overspent to keep themselves in a good position. Well,
the funny thing about that is as well, right? Kieran said like the bigger clubs aren't too fussed because they're going to generate revenue no matter what. I mean, Chelsea. I think Chelsea didn't have a front of shirt sponsor last season for the first game until they finally got one towards the middle of August. So I think they just have the backing on their side. Whereas you look at a Wolves and a Palace, I mean, they're not small clubs, are they? They're like mid-table, decently sized teams, but it's impacting their finances now. I think anyone outside the so-called Big Six, I think they're looking to generate and maximise revenues because, I mean, it comes back down to the PSR rules, and it comes down to the fact that they are quite stringent, and there's a need to rehaul them, and so we'll see what the anchoring. I know they're doing like a shadow trial run this season in terms of like a cap and then the anchoring system as well that Kieran mentioned, and I think they're trialing that out for this season before it comes into effect in a literal sense, maybe next season or the season after that.
Mm-hmm. And then these deals, obviously, the connection between sports and betting has been getting a lot of scrutiny, I think is a good way to describe it, over recent years, within sort of the context of that Gambling Act Review white paper that went on for about 2.5 years. There's been a lot of sort of public concerns about the visibility of betting, how obviously the Premier League has quite a young following among a lot of children, and betting is obviously an age-restricted activity. So with this sort of upsurge in deals lately, how much of a reaction have we seen to these? Is there any way we can kind of judge the prevailing public opinion about these betting sponsorships?
Sort of speaking on that, I think obviously a lot of these operators and a lot of these betting brands that we've sort of named in the run through that I give, they're not, let's say, they're lesser known in the UK. Obviously that could be seen as the operators trying to gain visibility in a market they're trying to get into. But it has sort of raised a few questions with a lot of supporters who are sort of questioning the ethics around the deals. Like, obviously it's quite apparent that these deals are only there to generate money, as we've already mentioned. But on Twitter you've seen sort of uproars and fans trying to like investigate the operators and see who's behind them and stuff like that. So I would definitely say that there is quite an apparent trend in fans now questioning betting deals and getting behind things like programs like The Big Step, who have been very active in fighting against these sponsorships.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where you fall as a fan, because at the end, one side, you people are like, well, I'm not really bothered how my club generates money and what, as long as they, abiding by rules. Whereas there's also fans that are questioning like the ethics and because last season, I know when we talked about Chelsea then before, there was reports that they was about to sign a deal with Stake, the online casino operator, and the Chelsea Supporters Trust came out and vehemently, they didn't want it to happen because they see themselves as a big club, which they are, and they don't feel that they need gambling and betting partners, especially on the front of kit. So, and then also Aston Villa fans came out, I think it was about a couple of months before BK got announced as their front of shirt sponsor, and they also said the same thing. They said that it's a bit outdated now. I think there's something to that effect. It's a bit outdated and it's a bit, not what the club should be pursuing. But like we said before, I think the gambling sponsors are offering the most money, and the clubs are just saying, well, look, we've got to make money. We've got to make the most amount of money, and we haven't really got much time because we have these deadlines and these thresholds to meet. So, yeah, it's. I can see the club's argument, and I can also see the fans' argument, and it's just a matter of ironing out these PSR rules and making it so that every club can prosper and not just the big six clubs.
There's a lot of pressure just on clubs in general from all different areas, isn't there, really? Both sort of financial fair play, profit and sustainability, the need to perform well on the pitch and keep yourself in the top league, and if you're lucky enough, potentially win something, as well as then sort of maintain that connection to your fans, who are arguably the most important sort of stakeholder in all of this when it comes to sort of clubs' relationships and things like that. And
being in the Premier League year in, year out, that's the most valuable thing that a club can be in, because we've seen so many teams that they get relegated, like your Birmingham Cities, for example, or your Portsmouths, they were like mainstays in the league, weren't they?
Yeah, Sunderland.
Sunderland as well. Like that yearly revenue, TV revenue, as we know, media rights are just absolutely surging right now. I know this Premier League inked a $6.5 billion deal last December. So all that money being generated coming in from the TV deal, and plus your sponsorships, because you're in the Premier League, you get more higher, sponsorship deals. Just being in the league year in, year out, that's such an important revenue growth driver for these clubs. So yeah, there's massive pressure on them to achieve financially, and then also on the pitch.
And then that adds the other thing in of the clubs that aren't in the Premier League, who don't get that TV money and don't get that exposure. It's often been said, hasn't it, for a lot of the teams in the EFL, they're the ones who rely even more on these betting deals, because these companies are willing to pay a lot of money to get that exposure and engage with fans. And the EFL clubs, that's a very valuable source of revenue, and it's, managing a football club, it's a very difficult financial task, governing a football club, running one from a business perspective. I think something else is important to mention, just as we're getting to the end of this, is there was a study last week, I think Gamble Aware announced it, and there's also one from the Football Supporters Association showing some, a lot of discontent with the betting deals. I think just sort of the number of them we've seen over the years is definitely leading to some fatigue, and I think like you said earlier, Callum, I think some fans are seeing them as a bit outdated and not entirely necessary. So anyway, I'll just round off with we'll return to the Euros, try and end this on a bit more of a fun note. Who do we reckon's going to win it based on what we've seen so far? Kieran, your prediction first, mate.
I've said it from the start, and even though I watched the game last night and they sort of threw me off a little bit, I'm still going to stick with Portugal. I think Portugal have got it, even though they got a harder run, I suppose, than England. And what about you, Callum?
For some reason I can still see England getting to the final, just because you're away from that side of the bracket where it's got Spain, Germany, and Portugal, France on that Friday. Because that's just like a bloodbath, isn't it, really? Whereas England, we could face, albeit, Switzerland have been great to watch.
Yeah, they've been a surprise, haven't they?
Austria and Turkey has also been quite impressive as well, especially Austria. So, we could easily get knocked out by any of them teams, but you'd fancy your chances to beat them, and then once it gets to the final, it's a free hit, really, if you go up against France, Portugal, Germany, or Spain. So I still think we can get to the final. If we were to get to the final, I'd expecting to meet Spain there, And I'd put Spain beat us. So
yeah. I think Spain are a pretty solid shout for the whole thing, aren't they? But again, the way England have been playing, I wouldn't be surprised if we just carry on falling upwards and just somehow manage to get there. But yeah, so obviously, the rest of the Euros is on. I'd encourage all our listeners to keep a close eye on that. There'll be some great games to come, and should be some great iGaming dailies to come as well, of course. So please stay tuned, and see you all next time.
Thank you for listening to today's iGaming Daily podcast, supported by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming market. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.